everyone. Welcome to Tech Talks by ResellerClub. I'm Abbas and I'm going to be your host for today. In the previous episode, we spoke about how design trends can help boost conversions. We covered topics like A/B testing, drug testing, and the F rule, and a bunch of other cool stuff. Today, we're going to talk about something a little more specific to India, the GST rule that was recently mandated by the government, and how this will impact your business. We will also be covering the changes that we've made on our platform to support the GST tax rule. Joining us today are Karan Bhujbal and Chandresh Dawalia. Chandresh, hi, how are you?
Hi, Abbas.
Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Chandresh has been with us for over 12 years now. He's a team lead for the compliance and finance team, and he's going to talk a little bit about GST. Chandresh has a presentation to share. Yeah.
Abbas, thanks, ResellerClub, for giving me this opportunity. It has been pleasure, talking to you guys on the GST. I have my presentation on GST where I can walk you through the nitty gritties of the GST and some of the stuff that I'll be explaining impacting our industry.
All right, Chandresh, that sounds exciting. Let's begin.
Thanks, Abbas. So, shall I start?
Yep.
So GST, as we all know, is a landmark indirect tax reform which has been introduced in India effective 1st July. It is a replacement of major indirect taxes which has been levied all over the India. GST is a comprehensive multi-stage destination-based service tax.
Okay.
It has been levied on all the value addition which has been done each and every stage.
Okay.
If you go through the second slide,
yes.
Talks about the comparison GST vis-a-vis service tax as we are into service industry.
Okay.
Service tax which is the one which is more impacting us. So I have covered what was the scenario post GST and which is scenario prior to GST.
Okay.
I'm not touching on the international aspect.
Okay.
GST is basically one tax, one nation kind of thing.
Policy. Yes.
GST has basically subsumed various indirect tax at central and state levels.
Right.
In the Indian scenario, prior to GST, we have multiple of taxes.
That's right.
Multiple of indirect taxes. Taxes are well levied on specific manufacturing, service, kind of thing. And the credits were available for all the inputs. So in a hybrid manner, not in the structured manner. And it was like an isolated process, service tax, VAT, and all that. Some taxes were levied by VAT, some central, some were state. So
that's right.
To make it more comprehensive and to make it like for single tax, single nation, GST has been introduced.
Okay.
Post GST, if you see, it's like a dual tax only.
Okay.
Where it will be a state GST and central GST.
That's right. Yes.
Which will be levied, subsuming all the indirect tax that has been levied till date.
Okay.
It has been levied on all the supplies which are going to happen within country, with the restricted tax credit available at all the states.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is entirely an automated process.
Okay.
So everything which is going to be done under the GST regime will be based on the platform, and everything will be automatic process.
Okay.
Like raising an invoice, getting an input credit, and all that stuff.
That's right. Yes.
So that is the thing which is going to be a game changer.
Okay. Wow, that sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah. So if you look at my third slides,
right.
Where what all taxes which are going to be subsumed under the GST regime.
Okay.
If you look at the central side, so earlier it was central excise duty, service tax, additional excise duties, CVDs and cesses which are being levied by the central government on all the supplies and manufacturing. That has been going to be subsumed under the GST regime.
Okay.
On the state side, we have octroi, we have entertainment, value addition taxes, purchase, and all the taxes which are going to be subsumed under the GST regime.
Absolutely.
Then we have one more concept called UT GST, which is for union territory.
Okay. Yes.
So if you are doing supplies within union territories,
Okay.
then it will be a UT GST which will be levied. So we have under GST regime we have actually state GST, central GST, integrated GST is where if you are doing interstate supply, then it will be IGST.
Okay.
And IGST will be allocated further allocated
Further
to the
allocated.
state. So it is like it will be a zero sum game.
Okay.
So it is not going to be like, but ultimately the tax are going to be a portion between state and
the central.
Central.
Right. That's a pretty good. Yeah.
Then I just take you to the fifth slide, which talks about what are the basics of GST.
Yeah. All right.
Where so if you first is if you have the location of the supplier.
Okay.
If the location of the supplier is within the state,
okay,
that is intrastate.
Intrastate,
So
yes.
if you are say, for example, if you are located in Maharashtra,
Okay.
and I'm your consumer is also your customer or
Is
your
also
seller
located
is
in
also located in Maharashtra, then you will be levying CGST plus SGST.
Okay.
If your customer is located outside Maharashtra,
Yes.
then it will be considered as an interstate supply,
Okay.
and IGST will be levied on that.
So let's say if I am here and my consumer is in Karnataka, IGST is
IGST that will be high.
Okay.
The main thing is even if your customer doesn't have a GST ID,
okay,
but if you are knowing his place of supply,
right.
So if you are aware that his address is Karnataka,
right,
then you will be charging IGST and not the C plus SGST.
Not the C plus
and
SGST.
That is what is specifically mentioned in the law also.
Okay, wow. So that is something really important to note.
Yeah.
In the new GST regime.
Correct. Now, import of goods will be treated as a IGST.
Okay.
It will be considered as an interstate supply.
Okay.
So if you are importing services from say USA or say UK or somewhere,
right,
some other destination which are non-taxable as far as GST is concerned,
okay,
then it will be considered to be under a reverse charge mechanism.
Okay.
And IGST will be levied.
Okay.
Export is considered as a zero dated under the GST regime,
wow,
but
okay,
subject to certain conditions.
Right.
Like first you have to pay the IGST in some of the cases,
okay,
and then claim the refund, or you can give the undertaking. Recently, I just read out that they will say that you can give the letter of undertaking,
okay,
and then pay the raise the invoice without charging any
IGST. Okay.
So that's something.
That's something I didn't
that's
know.
a
Yes.
good news for our industry.
Yeah, that's really good.
So then, if I take you through my sixth slide, which
Okay,
speaks about the dual GST features.
right.
So in GST regime, if you the main is the place of supply.
Okay.
Place of supply where there has been no convergence as such.
Okay.
And then it's a place to which the supply is made.
Made. Okay.
So these are the two basics, that
talks about this.
That talks about, yeah. Then my seventh slide, if you go to, it speaks about what was the registration requirement under the GST regime.
Okay.
So prior to GST, like under service tax,
right,
since we are talking about this in our industry only, I will be speaking more on the service part only.
Okay.
So under the service tax, it was like a centralized registration was available.
Okay.
Like if you are a service provider, then you can take one single registration and do
universally
and pay the service tax and
okay.
But under the GST, if you are providing services from 2 different locations or 3 different locations, then you have to get registered in each state and then pay and discharge your liability.
Right. All right.
So
that is
something different which under the GST
regime,
and which is going to increase the compliance requirement as well.
Okay.
Because you will be filing your returns for each state
separately now.
Though it will be an online process, but yeah, the compliance requirement will be there. So which is something which will be
something
little bit hard.
Yes.
So under the GST regime, if you are say what I have covered is if you are located in Mumbai,
right,
and you are supplying the say services to Delhi or say to other state,
right,
then you will be charging the IGST, and it will be 100%. So whatever the rate is applicable in our case, it is 18%.
Okay.
So that say your cost is 100, then 100 plus 18%, 118 you will be charging to IGST will be charged on the invoice.
All right. Okay.
So this is in case of single registration.
Right.
And but if you are located in say multiple states, so if you are doing
Okay.
invoicing from multiple locations,
Okay.
suppose you have office in Delhi, you have office in Mumbai, and both are invoicing to end customers,
Right.
then you need to obtain the registration both in Delhi and Mumbai, as
Mumbai
well,
as
and
well,
whatever
yes.
the GST lab is
Liability,
there,
yes.
that you need to discharge
Okay.
in each state separately.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Then I need not to talk. Just I my second slide, ninth slide speaks
Right.
about when the GST is applicable, on which all supplies is subject to.
So it's basically a long descriptive list of.
You can just go through this slide and
Okay, so this is
come
pretty
up with a
self-explanatory.
pretty self-explanatory.
All right.
When GST will be applied, what all supplies will be
Right.
considered for the GST purpose.
Yes, that's
When the
absolutely
reverse
right.
charge will be applicable under the GST. What is the value of
Right.
how interstate supplies will be considered,
Considered,
how
right.
the related party transactions will be considered,
Okay.
and how it is to be valued and all that,
All right.
and what is the exemption. Today the main thing which we need to take into mind is under the GST they have kept the basic threshold as at 20 lakhs only.
Okay.
So those who
that is
don't have
something
the
that's
turnover of more than 20 lakhs
okay.
are only required to register. If your turnover less than 20 lakhs, you need have to go
Through the whole
you
tedious
need have
process.
to
Okay.
go through the registration process also.
Okay.
Then there is a composite scheme also under the GST, which is not applicable
Okay.
for us for our industry, and that's why I'm not going to speak much on that.
All right. Not a problem.
Then I take you the rates of the taxes. There are
Okay.
various slabs for the various goods and
Right.
services, but
Obviously.
for us it will be 18%.
Okay. So it's 18% on there, guys.
18%,
Yes.
yeah, which will be a hit. It was 15% earlier under the service tax.
Okay.
Now, effective 1st July, it has been 18%.
All right. All right.
My
Moving
last
on.
slide speaks about the place of supply and rule.
Okay.
Under the if you are a domestic,
Right.
when we say domestic, means supply within the India.
Okay.
So place of supply rule is generally destination based.
Okay.
So if you are situated in Mumbai and supplying to
Someone in Delhi. So
somebody
Delhi would be
within
the-
India,
Right.
then where you are supplying is the main
Okay.
is that will be considered as a GST trigger point.
Okay.
So if you are supplying within Maharashtra, it will be S plus C GST,
Right.
and if you are supplying out of Maharashtra, it will be
S plus IGST.
it will be IGST. only.
IGST. Okay.
So for a international place of supply, it
Okay.
will be a destination subject to various exemption.
Okay.
Exception I'm saying.
Okay.
Import will be considered under the reverse charge mechanism,
Okay.
and export as
As
you
you
already
mentioned
speak,
earlier, yes.
it is considered as a zero rated, but subject to various fulfillment of various
Fulfillment
conditions.
of yes, of course.
Then what are the basics for getting the input credit? For
Okay.
getting the input credit, I have bifurcated into three.
Okay.
You should have received the services.
Okay.
Then you should have received the invoice as well,
That's right.
and invoice has to be paid within 6 months,
Right.
180 days. That is what they are referring
That's
to.
what yes. Okay.
Then vendor should have for you to get the credit. Vendors to whom from whom you have procured the
goods.
supplies and
Right.
services need to pay the taxes.
Okay.
So if he doesn't pay, if say for example you have procured services from me,
Right.
but I have not paid the taxes, then you are not going to get the credit for that.
Okay.
Though I have
Understood.
collected the GST from you,
Right.
but if I have not paid it to the government treasury,
Right.
and you are not going to. So
Okay.
I have to pay the taxes and reflect it to the government
Government as well.
that
All
I have
right.
paid taxes on.
All right.
And also another important criteria
Yeah.
that he has to upload the return as well. monthly
Okay.
Returns.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
until these two things, he has paid the GST and he has uploaded the return.
There is no way. Yeah.
There is no way that person is going to get the credit.
That's
So
absolutely
you
right.
have to be after your vendors.
Okay. So you have to.
Yeah, this
Yes,
is something
yes.
Government says now once GST is implemented, I will not be behind the person.
People. You
since
yourself
are
will be
dealing
behind the
with the
person.
business. You go after that and make sure that he pays the taxes
Right.
to the government
Absolutely.
treasury. then only I will give you the credit. Otherwise, I will not.
Yes.
And credit is blocked in certain
Okay.
cases, subject to certain apportionment also.
Okay.
What is now majorly we have in our industry, we have most of the our suppliers are considered as a online information and
Absolutely.
covered under the online information and data retrieval services.
Okay.
We have instances where many of our resellers are importing some of the services
Right.
from foreign suppliers.
Right.
In that case, there will be a reverse charge. So I'll just take you through that provisions under what is provisions under the GST for the reverse charge mechanism.
Okay.
Reverse charge is as good as same under the GST, where it was under service tax also. Okay. So what is considered as the import of services under GST? Yes. There are three important criteria. They are saying that if the supplier of the services is located outside India, okay, the recipient of the services has to be in a taxable territory, which is India, and the place of services has to be in India. So if these three conditions are fulfilled, then it will be considered as a import of services under the GST regime, right, and reverse charge will be applicable. Will be applicable. So whomsoever is the recipient of services under this case will be discharging the IGST, responsibility. All right. Then just given you the brief flow chart, where if you are importing services, if you are B2B supplier, okay, then it will be paid, the service recipient will pay the GST under the reverse charge. Reverse charge. Okay. But if the supply is under B2C, right, then service provided to a non-taxable territory, right, service provided to a non-taxable territory, online recipient taxable is taxable territory, then that's right, supplier is required to discharge. So in that case, there is this is something to what they have introduced in somewhere in December 2016, okay, under the service tax regime also. Right. So they are saying that if some supplier is providing services in India, yeah, but he doesn't have any offices in India, right, then either he has to get himself registered in India, okay, or so from agent, and okay, discharge this GST, because okay, his place of supply is in India. In India, okay. But if he's supplying to say some B2B guy who's already registered, right, so if a reseller, yeah, if I say one of the reseller is procuring services from a supplier, but right, GST, but the supplier himself is already registered, right, then in that case, that's supplier need not to discharge the because reseller has to pay the GST under the reverse charge mechanism. So that is something that whenever you are importing services, right, you need to keep it in mind and discharge the responsibility. Because it is a supplier who has to pay it under a reverse charge. Right, like you mentioned. And yes, yeah. Then I need not to talk in much about that, but I will what is considered as online information and data retrieval services. Okay, so this is something that you we come under this category. Yeah, so all the services which are being supplied by Reseller Club and which are like online services, right, that are being considered as online information and data retrieval services, okay, and are governed under this particular section. Section 217 of the IGST. Okay. Wow. So it's more descriptive, so I did not do. Again, this is something that you purely information. If somebody has any questions on that, we can take it. We can definitely take them through. Yes, yeah, that's absolutely right. Then my last slide speaks about the compliance requirement. Compliance on the registration side, compliance on the invoice side, right, compliance on the return side, and then on behalf compliance like TDS, TCS compliance, right, all that. Of course. Major compliances, major changes that I would like to highlight here is on the invoice front, where the invoices has to be serialized numbered, right, it has to be digitally signed, okay, and it has to mention the place of supply, right, it has to mention the GST ID of the supplier, and right, if it is a supply to registered supplier, then it has to mention the GST ID of the customer as well. Yes. So to get the input credit, of course, which will be the prime requirement under the GST to get the input credit. Also, on the invoice side, we have to issue the invoice in duplicate.
Right.
The original invoice should contain
The
the
original
original
or
for
the
recipient
right.
and duplicate for our record purpose.
Okay, absolutely.
So the compliance requirement, all the registration, invoices, returns, everything is there. They've given the snapshot on the
presentation.
slide presentation.
Okay.
You
Yes.
can go through, and if you have any questions on that, then you can get back to us.
Of course, Chandresh. Thank you so much.
So yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Something.
So, thank you so much, Chandresh. I mean,
Yeah.
you took us through the GST presentation in depth. I'm sure a lot of our viewers have questions for you. A little earlier, we sent out a mail taking a couple of questions from a few
Okay.
people.
Yeah.
I would like to actually read them out if that's all right, and
Sure.
we can just take them one
Yeah,
by one.
yeah, definitely. We can.
All right. Thank you, Chandresh.
Mm.
So, without any further ado, let me start off with our first question. Vipul sent us a question saying he would like to know more about GST. So, hey Vipul, we've actually covered the session in depth. Chandresh has spoken a lot about GST. In case there's something more specific that you're looking at, you can definitely write back to us, or you can comment on the comment box below the video as well. I think that's a good way, and we'll definitely answer whatever your question is. Moving on, Sai Krishna sent a question saying, how are we actually billed and how do we bill our customers?
So, Abbas, under the GST regime, as I already spoke to you in the earlier slide as well,
Right.
that invoices, when if you are doing some intrastate supply,
Right.
then you will be charging C plus SGST.
Right.
So the total rate is 18%. So you will be charging 9% SGST and 9% CGST.
That's right.
So that will be make it 18%.
Right.
And all the interstate supply has to be charged IGST.
Okay.
So if you are located in Maharashtra and if you are supplying something to Karnataka,
Right.
then you will be charging IGST.
IGST. All right. All right. I think that pretty much answers your question, Sai Krishna. Moving on, folks at Neo Concepts have sent a question in saying mostly their foreign clients pay by PayPal, and that comes to their bank account in INR through NEFT. And does their service still qualify for export of service and then GST 0%?
So yeah, this is a very good question. Export for supply to be considered as export of services.
Right.
There are the 5 conditions which have been prescribed under the GST rule.
Okay.
Section 2(6) of the IGST speaks about that.
Okay.
So if I go through your questions,
right,
you are saying that payment has been collected in PayPal,
right,
but the settlement is happening in India.
Yeah, it's the bank, the money is coming in the bank in INR.
India, and that is also not coming in the convertible foreign exchange.
Right.
So I'm not too much sure, but I may have to go into more depth of the thing.
All right.
But if you are apparently it looks like that you are not fulfilling the one of the conditions. That you are not receiving the money in convertible foreign exchange, and that's why your supply is not considered. Will not be considered as export. Right. But still, if you can send us more specifics, we can go into that and can guide you whether that will be considered as export or not.
So right, guys, at Neo Concept, you can write to us. You can be a little more specific with your question. As Chandresh said, you might not meet one of the criteria that is specified for export of service. Moving on, Babu sent us a question too. He said he wants more knowledge about GST and how it's actually going to affect small hosting firms like his. So, yeah, Chandresh.
So, Abbas, the presentation which I have given to you,
right,
fairly covers all the
elements and all the points
of how it is going to impact our industry basically.
All right.
Hosting and domain and all. So, Babu, I guess we have covered it. This in our slide. If he can go through our slide, and if he has more questions specific if he can
to
come
anything,
up with something specific, then we can address that as well.
All right. You heard from the expert, Babu. If you have anything more specific, let us know and we'll answer that too. Moving on, Chandresh. Sachin actually sent us a question. He's actually sent us a case. Let me read that out to you. So, basic rules for GST are clear to him. He just wants to explore his knowledge on this more and more. So, he will be ready for all the questions from his customers. He basically needs to make a bill for a client who's out of India and for website and hosting services. And what should he charge? Would it be IGST or something else?
So, Sachin.
Right.
If you are doing any supplies out of India, it will be considered as an export of services subject to fulfillment of certain conditions.
Right.
Now, in case of export of services,
Right.
there are something that letter of undertaking you need to give.
Okay.
If you are doing export of service under letter of undertaking,
Right.
you need not to charge the GST,
Okay.
and it will be considered as a zero rated.
Okay.
So you can raise the invoice without charging any GST.
Okay.
But if it is not under letter of undertaking, then
Okay.
you need to first pay IGST and then claim for the refund.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you so much, Chandresh. So we have another question from a couple of folks at Yes Mom. She says that she's a reseller under 20 lakh turnover, and what would she do? What would be her case here?
So under the GST, it has been clearly specified that there is a threshold for 20 lakhs.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
if you are not crossing the threshold, you need not to go for the registration requirement.
Okay. All right.
So you need not to do any compliances if you are not crossing that limit.
Okay. All right. Moving on, folks at SparkHost also sent us a question saying GST applies to customers outside India under a reseller from India, and also does GST registration is the GST registration mandatory for Indian resellers?
So what he is trying to say? Is he trying to say that he is supplying services outside India, or he is procuring services from foreign vendor?
I think he's trying to say that he's actually giving services to customers outside India.
Then it will be considered an export, but
Okay.
subject to the prescribed condition which has been specified under the GST.
All right.
So, to fulfill all the condition,
Right.
then only it will be considered an export of services.
Okay.
And export is a zero rated. As
Zero.
you know.
Yes. Right. Moving on. This is the last question for the day. Folks at ActiveSys sent us a question. They're actually a small developer and a group of resellers who basically do business with ResellerClub, and their yearly turnover is really low. So they would actually want to know. They've specified it out here. It's less than 2 lakhs actually. So
That's a year.
yeah, so he doesn't have any service tax or GST in this case, and neither does he have a GST number. So he's basically asking, is the GST number required for him? I'm guessing not in this case, right?
So since he is not crossing the threshold,
Right.
as we already covered.
Right, in one of the previous questions.
If you are not crossing the threshold of 20 lakhs,
Right.
you need not to go for GST registration, and you need not to bother for the compliance requirement as well.
Right.
So no need. Yeah, Sachin can sleep easily.
Okay.
In Taken.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Chandresh. I think we've covered most questions for the day. I'm sure our viewers are delighted to have you and you as an expert to answer all their questions. However, if you have any more questions, let us know. Feel free to drop it in the comment box below, and we will definitely answer all your questions about GST. Next up, we have Karan Bhujbal. He's going to be joining us shortly, and he's going to be actually taking us through a couple of changes on our system that would support GST. So yeah, that's it from Chandresh. Thank you, Chandresh. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
It was a pleasure.
And we hope to see you again when we have something else to talk
Sure.
about. All right. Thank you. Now that we know a little bit about GST, let's move on to platform changes. We have Karan with us, who's been a product manager, and he's going to walk us through the exact control panel and billing changes that will help us support GST.
Hey, Bas.
Hey Karan.
Nice to be here. It's
Yeah.
great to be part of ResellerClub's Tech Talk initiative. Right, so now that Chandresh has explained to all of us everything that we need to do for GST, we made some platform changes to accommodate for the same.
Right.
Right, let me just take you through that quickly.
All right.
So I have this set up. Right, so first up, right, we made it really simple to start the GST, to start charging GST, right?
Yes.
So all you have to do is go to your panel, go to settings, get on to general settings, go to your tax rules, and right there you will see a line item, right? There's a line item for charge goods and service tax for India. It's a small little toggle, and all you have to do is switch it on,
Okay.
right? So when you do toggle it on, the first thing we're going to do is ask you for your GST ID, right? Your GST ID is mandatory for this,
Right.
so you have to go and fill in your GST ID, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Right, so there's a little bit of checks and validations in place that you've added the right state GST ID that's in your profile, and I'm just going to go here and enable this, and you're done, right? So you've enabled the GST tax rule with all those complex settings at the back end. Right?
Okay.
If you want to view the tax rates, then there's a tax rates modal up here, right? You can view the tax rate for all the different states, and with the rules that would apply, right?
Right.
Next up, let me take you through some of the billing changes that we've done, right? So what we've done is right here, we've introduced a new serialized ID, right? As Chandresh said, invoices need to be serially numbered. So here we have a new billing ID column right here.
Right.
And you'll see that I've made a few transactions in this panel, and there's you can see the billing IDs right there.
Right.
Right. So now I'm going to just deep dive into one of these. It's an invoice, right? And you can see that row number 2, you will see the invoice ID, which is the billing ID as one. So this is the first invoice that got generated on this panel, right?
Wow. Okay.
Right. So the next step that I have here is let's just take a print view for this.
Okay.
So I'm just going to hit print, and here you go. You can see on the top right hand corner, you can see the billing ID or the invoice ID number 1, right? So that's your new serialized invoice.
So this is how it's going to look from now onwards for everyone.
Yes, this is a change we made platform wide, right?
All right.
Next up, right, what I have is I'll just show that to you. Is I'm going to make a live transaction.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you how the GST would apply, right?
How the flow would work.
Yeah. So I'm just going to buy a hosting order here. So I'm on the Express card. So I'm just going to give me a second.
Now going ahead and selecting your product, the usual buy flow, and now we're going to take us through
Yeah,
the GST.
That's right. That's right. So I have a customer. I've already selected my customer, and I'm going to just. Yeah, so the order is placed, right? Let me just go back to the control panel and show you that. So, right, so there it is, right? You can see that second order that I placed for a customer of mine from Maharashtra.
Okay.
Right, and I'm going to show you that transaction, right? There it is. You can see invoice ID number 2, that's billing ID 2.
Right.
That's the new invoice that got raised with GST. And here's the invoice details, and here you can see SGST plus CGST that should rightly apply for a Maharashtra to Maharashtra transaction, right?
Okay.
Just to further check this invoice, you can see that the place of supply for this is Maharashtra.
Okay.
Right? I'm also from Maharashtra. You can see both the GST IDs, that is the supplier's GST ID, as well as the customer's GST ID,
right,
and your serialized invoice, right? That's another thing that you can see. Another bit is right at the end, there's a little bit of a watermark that says duplicate for supplier.
Okay.
Since I'm the supplier and I'm viewing this in my panel, we need to add that in, right?
Okay.
And you can see the CGST and SGST cost breakups, right, as well. So just going next, I'm going to now show you another transaction. So I'm going to do an interstate transaction, right?
Interstate transaction.
Right. So I'm just going to go to the Express card again. Just hold on. I'll have to first pick out a customer, but hold on. Let me just add in the domain details.
So in this case, we would be actually looking at a customer who would be from another state.
Yes. So I'm from Maharashtra and I'm picking out a customer here from Karnataka.
Right.
Right. And I'm just going to paste that customer here. And I'm going to choose to keep the invoice.
Okay.
Right. I've chosen to keep the invoice, and the tax is applied. You can see that tax for the customer, the interstate tax is applied, and I'm going to place this order. Right. So let's just hope this order goes through. I just have to give it a second. Yeah, and we're done. Right.
Right.
I'm going to go back and show you this little invoice as well. So go to list transactions again.
Right.
And what we have is invoice ID number 3. So you have 1, you have 2, and now you have 3. Right.
Right.
And again, you can see IGST here rightly that has applied to this transaction.
As the previous one.
Perfect, right? And that's direct 18%.
Right.
And on the print view, you will see again place of supply is Karnataka that's been called out. IGST of 18% has applied on this transaction, right? And again, invoice ID number 3 right on top here.
All right.
And the duplicate for supplier mark as well. So that is an interstate transaction, right?
Yes.
Any questions that you have?
So Karan, would I have an original invoice as me being the customer?
Yes, you would. You would. So let me just show you that. Let me go into a customer ID.
Okay.
Right. So let me just log into a customer. Usual login flows here.
Right. So now we are actually in the panel.
Yeah, I'm going to show you the same transaction for the customer.
All right.
But when he sees his invoice, what that little watermark would say, right?
All right.
It's not really watermark. It's just
It's just
called out there as an original or a duplicate, right? So I'm going to just hit print here. And there you see original for recipient right at the bottom there.
Right, yeah.
Right, so when you print this or you download this, you will see that
It is the original
right?
copy.
Yeah,
Yes.
so the customer will get an original copy for this.
Alright.
Right. Next thing I'm going to show you that where you can actually go ahead and add in your GST ID.
Right.
So the customer can add this in, a reseller can add this in directly from their profile.
Okay.
So they can go to their profile, hit edit, and if you're from India, you will see a GST ID field that shows up here.
Shows up. Okay.
Right. Now this is a validated field, right? So it's validating your state as well as your GST ID. And here I've added for Karnataka. I added a Maharashtra ID and that just gave me an invalid GST ID.
Okay.
I've added the right one in now, and and that's saved, right?
Okay.
So you can add your GST ID. This can also be done when you're adding a customer. So if you're adding a new customer, you hit go to customer, hit add. You would see that when you hit check India, a GST ID field would open up,
right?
And you can add in a GST ID, and this is validated as well.
Okay.
Right.
This is, however, mandatory though, right?
It's not mandatory for a customer, but if you are charging GST, this is mandatory.
Alright.
So you will see when you're charging GST and you toggle that toggle the GST tax rule,
right?
It'll ask you for your GST ID.
Okay.
Right, so for resellers who want to charge GST, this is mandatory.
So Karan, it's that easy to set GST on the control panel, yeah?
Yeah, it's just a simple toggle, and you just have to go switch it on, and all the rules will apply in the at the back.
Are there any other further changes that you would want to run us through?
We made a bunch of improvements to our billing engine. Some of which are mandated by GST, but some were also requested by our resellers in the past, and we've taken this opportunity to spruce stuff up in our panel. In fact, I can just take you through some of these changes, right? I mean, there are quite a few. So first up is, as I said, the new serialized ID, right? This is something that's been requested. So if I just go to my list transactions, like if I go to customers billing and then list transactions, here you would see the new billing ID column.
Right.
This is a serialized ID for all your billing instruments, right? So you have your credit notes, your debit notes, receipts and invoices. They all have their own unique serial ID, right?
Right.
And here you can see that there are about 3 invoices, a couple of receipts, and a single credit note, right? And they're clearly called out as at the billing ID.
Right.
So it's very easy to map these right here, right? Another thing is, once you go into any of these transactions, you will also see this on the print view and the PDF, right?
Right.
So let me just do that, right? Let me actually just go ahead here and take you into an invoice and show you where the billing ID comes. I did that in just before this, but I'll just show you that to you again.
All right.
Right. So I'm just going to pick out an invoice here.
So this would be universal across all your invoices, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this will be for all invoices, right? So the second row that you see here is where the invoice ID is.
Okay.
And if I hit print, you will see that it's on the top right hand corner is the invoice ID. So this is the second invoice that got raised on the panel. Oops, sorry about that highlight. But yeah. So this is how how this would completely look, right? So even your debit note ID or even your receipt ID would show up there, right?
Right.
So that's one of the changes we've made, a proper serialized system, right? Another thing is we've actually changed how credit notes work, right?
Right.
So a credit note needs to be associated one-on-one with an invoice, right? It's got to have the invoice ID that it's associated with.
Okay.
So which actually translates to you not being able to rate a miscellaneous credit note just off the hook, right? So if you ever go to your customers, and let me just take you through that as well. So I'm just going to list customers and pick out one customer and hit add funds, right?
Okay.
Now, here is where you would have earlier seen an option to raise a credit note or a receipt.
That's right.
So once I hit add funds, now you'll see that, let me just load, just continue. Right, so here you would see, on this screen, you would see that under the drop down, you have for type, all you can pick is a receipt. You can't pick a credit note.
Okay, so you can't pick the credit note option.
But in your subtype, we moved over all those credit note options to a receipt. That's what you can see here, right?
Right.
So if I can just probably pick miscellaneous credit and raise a receipt for your customer.
That's okay.
Right. That's one of the changes that we incorporated into to fit the whole GST tagging of credit notes with invoices.
Right.
Right. Now the next thing we've done, right, is hold on, let me just list out this transaction here. Right. So then where do you actually raise a credit note from, right? So I'll just show you that. So once you go to your list transactions view again, you can raise a credit note directly from the invoice, right?
That's right.
So once I'm in this transaction, I see that I have a couple of invoices. So yeah, let me just pick out an invoice here. So I'm going to pick out this first invoice, and on your invoice you'll see multiple options, right?
Right.
So let me discount this invoice, right? So I pick discount. Let's say I add in an amount here.
Alright.
It'll auto calculate the tax liability. I'll add in a transaction key, and I'm going to submit this, right? Now when I submit this, this is going to raise a credit note, right? So okay, discount added successfully. Let's see that credit note.
Let's see the credit note. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, that's your first line item there. So this
Okay.
is the second credit note that got raised. So it has a billing ID of 2.
Okay.
And if I further delve into this, and I'm gonna just hit the print view. Yeah, and there you go. So on the top right, you can see associated invoice ID number 3.
Right.
So this was raised for invoice ID number 3, right? The reason this is important is because you're actually gonna have to discharge tax liability on credit notes as well.
Okay.
And the government mandates that they are raised directly for an invoice.
Wow, that's something I didn't.
Right. So going forward, you'll have to raise one directly from the invoice, right?
Okay.
So that's one of the changes that we have made to credit notes. We're also planning to add a couple more options other than discount, like a pro rata refund in the next couple of weeks, and you should see that going forward as well.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
The another change we made is how pending invoices are handled, right? So if you go to let's say a customer account, let me just do that, right? And I pick out an order. I'm going to try and renew an order, and I'm going to drop out, right? So what that does is it's going to raise a pending invoice.
Okay.
Right. So if I'm in the panel, I'm going to pick out this order, right, that I just added earlier. Wow, just give it a second. It's a little slow, but yeah, I'm going to hit renew, right? So I'm in your customers panel, and the customer hits renew,
Right.
and he's going to be prompted a little modal that says, you know what, GST of 18% is going to be applicable on this transaction. So he's going to see that there. He hits renew again. Let's give it a second. And the next page is where he's going to drop out, right? So
Okay.
the next confirmation page, he says, okay, I'm not paying for this.
Right.
I drop out for some reason, connectivity drop out, whatever the reason is, he drops out, right?
Right.
What's going to happen is in my reseller panel, this is going to be raised as a pending invoice, right? So I'm going to take you back there, and I'm going to list transactions again. And right there, the first transaction you see is a
Yes.
pending invoice, right? It says transaction type pending invoice.
Pending invoice.
What's important to note here is that it doesn't have a billing ID or an invoice ID,
Yes.
right? Which means that you didn't collect money from your customer, nor have you, rendered the service for this particular order, which
That's
means
right.
that you don't have to pay tax liability on this,
Yeah.
right? So it's important calling it as a pending invoice, because if we give it a serialized ID, we call it an invoice, it'll show up in your reports and we need to file for tax, right?
Okay.
And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do it for just anybody getting renew and not paying you for it.
Not paying for it.
Right. So when does the next question rather is, when does this actually convert to an invoice? Right?
Yes.
This would happen if, let's say, the customer went and paid for this, or as the reseller, let's say, I have the option of hitting execute without payment, right?
Right.
Maybe my reseller is paying me offline or whatever this is, right? So I can actually go and hit execute without payment. Even though the payment hasn't come in, this is going to convert to an invoice because you rendered the service.
Okay.
And the government says that, well, whatever comes first, whether you render the service first or you collect the payment, right?
Right.
And so let me just show that to you guys, right? So I'm going to actually execute this order without a payment.
Okay.
Right, so I'm going to just execute this order without a payment. I'm going to come here. I'm going to hit execute without payment. And yeah, I'm going to say keep the invoice. And again, hit execute without payment. Just give it a second. Yeah, so the renewals happened at the back end. Your customer's payment hasn't come in. So let's see that transaction again, right? So let's go to our list transactions again. And there it is, right? So now it has transaction time is changed to invoice.
Right. I also noticed the number on it.
Yes, that's the billing ID, right? So that's the
Right.
fourth invoice that was raised from your panel. And this, you can actually discharge GST for this
Okay.
and collect a payment offline. Right?
Okay.
Or if the customer had paid for it, then well and good.
Right.
And so that's another change that we made on the platform. The last change we made is to debit transactions, right?
Okay.
Today we call them debit notes on our platform,
Right.
right? And from a GST perspective,
Right.
debit notes can only be raised if you are actually raising the service that raising the price of a service that you already rendered. So let's say domain name you charge 100, but you want to charge 120, right? So you raise a debit note for this. So, but the system allows you to raise debit notes for various things, right? So what we've done simply here is to make a cosmetic change. So I'm adding a debit note here,
Okay.
right? And I'll just show you the change that we've made, right? So I'm just going to add debit note, add a transaction key, and submit this, right? Now when I do this, I'm going to confirm. Yeah, so the debit note's been added.
Right.
But if I go back to our list transactions view and hit print, you will see that I'm not calling it a debit note on this view.
Right.
I'm calling it a debit, and I'm calling it a debit ID. I'm not even calling it a debit note ID.
Right.
This is simply to make sure that you don't have to, pass tax liability for this.
Okay.
Right. So you can actually raise a debit transaction and deduct the customer's wallet, and you don't have to basically give out any tax liability for this. And this is pretty important, right?
Right. That's right.
There are multiple touch points on the panel where even today it's called a debit note, but we're going to spruce things up, clean this up. It's going to be called a debit transaction going forward, and not really a debit note, right? Just a technical difference.
Cosmetic change.
Yeah, very cosmetic in nature. And those are all the changes from a billing perspective that we made. Some from a GST perspective, some from an overall system improvement perspective.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right, Karan. Thank you so much. Moving on, we have some questions from a couple of our viewers. Shall we begin?
Yeah, sure. Let's take those questions and knock them out.
So, Karan, we have a question that came in earlier this week from Garima. Let me read that out for you.
Yeah, sure.
Garima says, I'm a reseller and also sell other products and services in the GST regime. I need to submit invoice serial numbers now with multiple billing apps. How can I have serial numbers in the same sequence? I sell reseller products, bulk SMS and other web services. I use Zoho as a billing app. Can invoice generation be stopped for Reseller Club customers so that no duplicate invoice is generated?
Alright, so Garima, from what I understand is that you're using Zoho as a billing platform, right? And if that's what you've chosen to use as a billing platform, I would urge that for any service you render, right, whether it be our service, whether it be third-party providers for bulk SMS or your web designing charges, raise all your invoices from Zoho, right? And those will be serialized. You can file for them directly from Zoho, right? So to answer particularly your question about invoice generation on Order Box, that can't be stopped, but you have the option of not enabling the GST tax rule, right? So don't enable the GST tax rule. Your invoices are not going to be compliant and cannot be bound by GST then, right? And that would help you out though.
All right. Thank you, Karan. Thank you once again.
Glad to be here. I hope the session was insightful and you can actually get back to me on that.
It definitely was, yes. That's it for today. You can check the link to our previous episode. The link is mentioned in the description box below. And that's about it from me. Do give us a shout out if you thought this episode helped you. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and definitely subscribe to our blog. It's got a lot of informative stuff on it. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, comment, share it with your friends. That's about it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for us.